Drag me down my life. You stood by me when no one else was ever behind me. All these lights, they can't blind me. With your love, nobody can drag me down.
We'll start off with the question at the back.
Okay, this is to Scott. How do you show not tell when you're doing a story?
It's really about going deeper into what you're seeing. So what I teach my kids is to actually imagine that you're sitting in a cinema, just like you are now. Okay, you've got the screens, they widen. It comes on, it says, you know, your name, Productions. Watch the film in your head, see what's actually happening, and then go into real depth on each emotion. Okay, it's really about conveying the emotion behind it. Don't just say someone's sad. What do they look like when they're sad? If someone's crying and it's just a really soft cry, they're not that upset. Okay, so you have to be able to convey that. Just focusing on particular movements and feelings will really bring that out, but you've got to see it first. I think too many students treat a creative writing piece like an essay and just go, yeah, he was really sad. You know, his parents both died in a car crash, but he got over it really quickly. What does that actually look like to you? What is your character going through? And I think if you focus on that for each individual sentence, each individual paragraph, you'll get there across the line. But it does take practice.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, Scott. The more description, the deeper they go into explaining what they're actually saying, is more about showing than telling. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So the more detail. So the
more detail.
Okay. So it's not like the man rushed to the car. That's not really detailed. He rushed to the car, stomping his feet with tears rolling down his eyes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now you can actually visualize.
It changes the meaning of it.
Absolutely.
It absolutely changes the meaning.
You know, you could have thought, when I said, for example, the man rushed to the car, you could have thought he's angry, right? But when I said the man rushed to the car, stomping his feet with tears coming down his face, all of a sudden now the man is not angry, is he? He seems pretty sad. Maybe someone died. Maybe, you know, you're painting a different. Is that what you mean?
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic. Done.
Done.
Okay. We've got a question here. Then we're going to go there. Yep.
To Amy, what do you mean by a bad mark? Was it hard, or you didn't achieve the mark you wanted to achieve?
So for me, my bad mark was a little bit below average. Yeah, so that was my bad mark. But
when you say average, Amy, do you mean average of the class?
Average of the grade.
Average of the grade.
Average of the grade. Yeah.
So if the average was, say, 60 and you got something below that, you'd be cut.
Yeah. So like, I won't be cut, but I would be a little bit disappointed.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the mark? Like, just to get a 99.
Okay. So like, say the school average was, I don't know, like 60. My lowest one would have been a biology prac, which would have been like 54 or something like that. So something like that. But yeah.
I think the idea is that you've really got to use that to fuel you,
yeah,
rather than get upset by that mark. You know, you can get a bad mark every now and again, but if you then spiral into a pit of depression,
yeah,
and don't study for the next 2 weeks, you're actually just adding fuel to the fire and making it harder for yourself to recover. Yeah. Take that motivation and go, you know what, I didn't do as well as I wanted to, but I'm going to work harder at it to get better for the next time. Yeah. And that'll really get you above that line for the next time around. I
actually had a student who, you know, think about it like this. This student was pretty good student. She got to her half yearlies and she got 45% in a paper. Now half yearlies are worth about 25%. When you're getting 45% for an exam that's worth 25%, you'll be devastated. This girl, I spoke to her on the phone. She was crying for at least 2 hours, at least. Right? I didn't talk to her on the phone for that long, but she was crying for at least 2 hours. But the good thing about it, although that she took it hard on herself initially, because she had a higher standard, she actually ended up pinning that paper on her wall at home. So she stuck it up on the wall, and every time she'd come into the room, she'd be thinking to herself, I'm never going to let that happen again. She ended up with a 98.55 ATAR, right? So you can really make a difference. You've got to use your negatives and turn them into positives, which I think is something that Scott mentioned a little bit before as well. We'll go with the parent over here.
My name is Roy.
It's on.
Yeah, you have been discussed here that if you take the 12 units, and
Is this question directed at
Raghib,
Raghib?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
12 units, and you can take 10 units as well, and that counts best 10 if it is 12 units. Imagine the scenario that if it is somebody stuck up with 11 units, and how that is advantage or disadvantaged, how that will count it, how they count the 10 units from there.
Right. So this question about how many units is ideal for each student, I think is contingent on their subjects and their experience. So I did 12 units because I had to really, because when you're doing 4-unit English and 4-unit maths, you have to have another subject. So I think it depends on a whole bunch of factors. Generally speaking, though, this is just a general statement, and really these questions have to be specific to every student about where they believe, what might be advantageous, and sort of a lot of students, they go through their entire year thinking that the subject that they're going to do really well in, they didn't, and the subject that they didn't do too well in, or they thought they didn't do too well in, they find that was the one that finally counts. So that scenario does happen. So these questions are sort of best done case by case, but I think the general trend has been towards 10 units, because usually students find what their strong 10 subjects are relatively early on. Now that's a general trend. It doesn't mean that it's the best thing for all students. And as for 11 subjects, 12 subjects, again, I personally think it just depends on the scenario. I've advised people both ways.
I mean, it is always advisable to take the even number than odd number. Does it matter? How it matters that one? If you take 12 units.
As in from 11 to 12 to 10?
Yeah.
I don't think it matters too much. No, it depends on the subjects. It depends on the subjects.
But the way they do count it, and correct me if I'm wrong here.
How they count?
Yeah, so the way they actually count it is, so they count your best 10. So if that one unit was actually part of that best 10, so then the worst subject that you have, they only count half. So they count 1 unit of the other subject and 1 unit which is the extension subject. For example, if you did 2-unit English, 3-unit mathematics, and this could be the extra 1 unit, okay? Physics, chemistry, biology, for example, right? I'm coming up with anything here.
Fine.
Say the worst subject that you had was actually biology, okay? And the mark for that you got, for example, was 60%. And for 3-unit maths, out of 50, you actually got, for example, 45. So they'd count the 45 out of 50, and if biology you got 60%, so they count 30 out of 50 for that, and they'd make that one subject. Is that
Yes.
that's how it would work.
Yeah,
that's how they'd actually calculate
that's
it.
right.
So if you have 11 units, your worst subject will always count, because it has to count for 1 unit. And that's what I think people, they miss the boat. I think like this with that it's definitely going to count, because they do count your best 10. They can't count 1 unit as a 2-unit subject. So that 1 unit will be counted as part of half of the other unit, and they're going to have to count the other unit half of it as out of 50 as well. Sorry? English counts no matter what. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, English counts as 2 no matter what. Yeah, English. Yeah. So with English, it's a different story. I hope that answers your question. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. We've got one down the front, and we've got one right next to. Yep.
This one's actually, I have 2 questions. First one's for Amy.
Yeah.
What was your lowest internal mark?
Internal mark. I don't remember, but it's got to be English. I don't remember what mark though it was. I don't remember what the mark was.
That's all right.
Yeah, sorry.
And the second one, I think it's just like the general cohort. Raghib actually mentioned beforehand that some Year 12 students actually stay in like the Year 11 party mode, and they actually like still fail, and they're not as motivated as they should be. And for an 8, I'll say about 94 or 95. What would the lowest internal mark like, or how late can they sort of bludge? And how late is it? Like, no, I'm saying like,
What
how
you're
late
saying-
is it for it to turn around?
How much longer can you be lazy
Yeah.
for before you start sending me stuff? Is that what you're saying?
Not me. I still send you. Look in your inbox, Scott. Just saying.
I will.
But I'm saying like, no, I'm saying like, say for example, they get 60s in the half yearlies or 60s in the trial. Is it too late?
The way you got to think about it is like this.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of when's the latest I can click. Okay, it's not about that, right?
In general.
I'm with you. So it's not about when's the latest you can actually click. It doesn't matter. Look, you're going to have assessment 1, you're going to have a half yearlies, you're going to have other assessments happening in term 2, then you're going to have your trial and your HSC, right?
Yeah.
The later you leave it, the less chance of you actually doing very, very well. Like I'll give you a bit of an example, and I'll relate it back to what Raghib said and what your question is, right?
Yeah.
I had a student who went to Birrong Boys. Okay, take a guess at his ATAR. 99.7. Okay, how could a person who goes to Birrong Boys get a 99.7? Very easy, exactly what he said, right? He came first in every single one of his subjects. He came first again in the HSC for every single one of his subjects. So he kept his mark, and he's absolutely smashed it, right? So this kid would have actually performed no matter which school he actually went to. This guy will have actually done really, really well, correct? Okay, so now what you got to think of it is like this. Think of it as an empty bottle. Okay, your school is going to give you enough fluid to fill up that bottle exactly, right? So every assessment, they're going to give you a certain percentage of the fluid that can be in this bottle. First assessment, they're going to give you 15% of fluid that can fit in this bottle. Now, if you drop any of that fluid out of the bottle, you're never going to get the opportunity to put that fluid back in. You can't top it up, right? So the sooner you click, the more of a chance that you actually give yourself to actually perform in the HSC. You see, what you got to do is, and this is something Raghib mentioned as well, you want to maximize your chances. That's your objective. Okay? Your objective is not just to see what the shortcut is or whatever the case may be. See, this is what a lot of students actually do, and I was actually going to conclude the night with like this, but since it was a question, now I'll just take over the show for a second. Let me give you guys a bit of an idea. A lot of students, what they do is, they always look for the easy way out. They don't realize that, see, life is not as easy as you think it actually is. I remember when my father was telling me a story when my oldest brother, who's a bit more than 10 years older than me, he comes home from school, from primary school. He goes, Dad, he's really excited. Okay, he's really excited. Dad, can I please go to this excursion? Now, this is a very, very long time ago. Excursion was worth like maybe $1.60, okay, for the entire excursion. My father tells me this story. He says to me, he goes, I remember the day he came in, he was so excited to go and attend this excursion. And my father, being my father, he would never say no to us in terms of anything to do with school and education. He was always a forerunner when it comes to that. So he said to my brother, of course you can go. And he told me clearly he remembered taking this letter, this letter from school, taking it into the bedroom, leaving the light off so nobody realizes that he's in there, closing the door, and actually crying with the paper in his hand. Why? Because he actually didn't know how he was going to afford or to even get the money to pay for the excursion. That's how tough they were doing it. Nowadays, we are so spoiled. We got everything at our fingertips. We've got the technology. Our parents give us everything we want. If we ask for it, generally, we get it. So we actually lost this concept in our minds of working so hard to actually get what we actually want. And this is what you guys got to realize. You guys got to get over it. You guys got to jump out of jump off your bike, right? Get off your high horse and actually start putting in some genuine hard yards. You need to sweat. You need to bleed. You need to cry. That's how you're going to get the top marks. That's how you're going to get the top marks. It's not about asking, and I know you didn't mean it like this, but it's not about asking when's the latest I can click. You know when's the latest you can click? Yesterday. That's how you got to think. Yesterday was the latest you can click. And if tonight was going to be of any benefit to you, you will go home tonight and start. Because as soon as you put a date to change, as soon as you say, I will start on Monday, or I will start after these seminars, I will start after Sunday, or I will start next week, or I will start straight after this assessment or whatever, you know it's not going to happen. Because you say that at the beginning of every single year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Remember the beginning of the year? When you say to yourself, you know what? This year's going to be different. Is it different? Absolutely not. It's never different. You know what else happens, right? Your book at the start, border, double underlined, date. 3 weeks later, your book's a signature pad again. Right? Why? Because that's based on hype. You just talk. right? What you got to do now is it's not about the talk, and that's what these 2 nights are actually about, tonight and tomorrow even more so. When I'm going to talk about the mindset tomorrow, that's my talk, right? We actually had another speaker lined up, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it, and I'll explain why tomorrow. I'm actually going to do that talk, and tomorrow you'll see what I mean by action, right? See, it's not about just sitting here listening and just feeling good about yourself, and then, oh, you know what, I attend this seminar, all of a sudden now I'm going to get a 99. It's not going to happen, right? You got to actually now start putting the hard yards. So I hope that answers your question.
Definitely, thank you.
Any other questions? Yep.
This question is dedicated to Kate and Amy. So you guys are at the UNSW studying medicine. You got high ATARs and must have done really well for your subjects. But you also had to do the UMAT and do well to get into medicine. How did you manage your time and fit in that UMAT study? And what did you do so that you didn't fall behind with school, but progress with UMAT as well?
I think what happens, is this on?
Yeah.
I think what happens with a lot of students who don't do well in the UMAT is that they tend to study a lot in the last 2 months leading up to the exam, as opposed to throughout the year. So for me, I'll be honest with you, I didn't do much UMAT study, but what I did was maybe a couple of hours every week. So maybe 2 or 3. And the main thing was not the workload I was doing, but it was the consistency. Because it was kind of, the UMAT is more based on how you can think as opposed to what you know. So the sooner I could develop this way of thinking, develop my skills, because it's an actual skill you need to develop, the more of a chance I had on improving what I could do. So I think as opposed to studying in the last 2 months, especially during the trial period, you should be studying consistently throughout the year. Even if it's not a lot, 1 or 2 hours I think is enough, to be honest.
I did something similar, but I think how I got through that was I really used the holidays. So the holidays are coming up, and I would try and get my school stuff at least started, and then throughout the year I'd do some UMAT prep. But to be honest, I didn't do as much UMAT prep as I wanted. But for UMAT, really know what you can study and what you can't study. So it used to be divided into 3 sections. One was patterns, one was problem solving, and the other one was empathy. So for example, the empathy one, you can't do anything but learn your definitions. But it's the problem solving one that gets everyone. So I just worked on that. So it's identifying your weaknesses and working on that early, so that by the time your exam does come, you're not cramming everything into the last minute. I think
also because UMAT is not actually a subject at school, right? Although it counts to get into medicine, if you don't perform in UMAT, it's just as substantial as getting a 929 ATAR, for example, right? Now the problem is with that is that there's no homework, there's no assignments, there's no regular checks, and there's no one to really stay on top of you to make sure that you're actually doing well and really setting yourself up in the right way to actually perform in UMAT. So one of the things that you should probably also look for is somebody who's able to mentor you through UMAT also. So somebody who's going to give you homework, somebody who's going to give you an assessment, somebody who's able to also help you and not literally hold your hand in terms of doing things for you, no, rather just being that stake for you to make sure that you're actually going to be consistent from that regard. And it's like Kate said, I remember they used to actually have groups where they used to actually get together and study UMAT, right? And it was actually from their year that Alpha Omega actually came up with the concept of the Met Club, right? And that's where they actually used to get together on a weekly basis for 2 hours a week, and then they used to have a 2-hour class as well. And now we ran that again last year, and we're going to run it again as of week 6 this year as well. They get together on a regular basis, weekly 2 hours, and they also have a 2-hour class where they have someone who did okay in UMAT, who's able to support them and help them from that respect as well. So I think finding something like that will actually be really good for you, only because, and I'm saying that really because you don't get that support from a school because it's not a subject, right? So you actually don't get that, right? We'll take one more question. I believe there was a question. Where is it? Okay, we've got 3 more questions. So we'll go 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Yes?
This question is for Scott. For creative writing tasks, you said something about picking something easy and then not write about drugs or mental illnesses. Do you have any suggestions of what we could write about?
In other words, Scott, would you like to write his creative right now? I'm kidding.
Yeah, sure. Look, it's just about picking something. It's not easy, but picking something simple. So taking something really small and making it more significant. So one of the examples that I use in my class all the time is when I get home from work, my 3-year-old will often run out of the door to chase me down. Dad, you're home, you're home. And that's a really significant moment in my day, in my life. And so I'd try and capture that, but I'd then expand that and go, you know what? I actually work about 4 or 5 days a week full on. So when my daughter does see me, it's Monday, Tuesday if I'm running around. So say, oh, what if I'm a character who's a workaholic? And I come home, I feel this moment. And from there, I learn what I truly value. Okay, and it comes from just that feeling, that experience that I have with my daughter. Okay, so something really simple, but you learn something strong about yourself. We turn around and we say that English, it doesn't count, it doesn't, what do you learn from English, what can you take from it? But it's really about exploring who you are and what you learn about life, my philosophical moment for the night, but what you learn about life. And so I would take something that I've experienced and expand on that, maybe apply it to a character who's not yourself.
Creative writing is only for discovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of the area of study is to link it back to the self, is that right? Like if you actually look at all the areas of study for the last few areas of study, so this one's discovery, the last one's belonging, the one before that was journeys, and the one before that was change. So when you talk about change, you can really relate that to yourself. When you talk about journeys, it's a journey that you can go through. When you talk about belonging, it's about me belonging. When you talk about discovery, it's what I can discover, right? So, and I think a lot of people miss the boat when it comes to that, right? You really got to go really deep into yourself. And when we say that, it doesn't mean write about your life, right? It doesn't mean write about your life, but you will see that you actually know more than you actually think. You can write about things that you think can be actually fantastic, right? Like I'll give you an example. When she asked that question, and I answered it the way I answered, you probably saw a bit of, I won't call it frustration, I'll call it passion. You guys saw passion in that or not? Right? And the reason why is because I didn't sit there and prepare, what would I tell her if someone said something like this? It came from the heart, right? And when you write from the heart, you'll see that it actually comes across a lot better. Like I read this little piece once, and I'll just tell you a little bit about it. It was about this little boy, because he's talking about a workaholic. His father was a workaholic. So every time his father would come home, he'd actually ask his dad, Dad, how much do you get paid? And his dad would get angry at him, right? Until one day he said to him, why in the world do you want to know how much I get paid? I get paid X amount of dollars an hour, right? So for example, he told his son, I get paid $10 an hour. So after a little while, his son comes to him and he says to him, Dad, here's $10. He goes, what's this for? He goes, can I please have 1 hour of your time? You get the idea? Now look what just happened. Oh. What just happened? If that was a piece of writing that somebody actually had written, guess what would happen? You'd be thinking, oh. You get the idea? Some people might even shed a tear, depending on how closely they can relate to it, right? So what just happened? You made the reader feel something. And that's the whole idea. Am I right?
Yes.
Saying that?
Yes.
There you go. 2 more questions. We said the one at the back and the one on the right. We'll go with the one first.
This is just a general question. Do you think the best way to manage time and avoid falling behind is to use study plans and stuff like that?
I always advise my kids not to use a study plan that tells me, on Monday night I'm going to be studying chemistry and English, because the example that I always use is, what happens if you have a maths exam on Tuesday? Okay, so you spend a lot of time coming in. I've got students who come in and they say, oh, look at my study plan. It's color-coded. It took me an hour to prepare. And then I'm like, so you've got a maths test tomorrow. Are you studying chemistry and physics tonight? No, I'm doing maths, but it's not on my plan. So I think that students take a lot of opportunity to just attach to that, but they never use it, they never follow it. So for me, I prefer a much more adaptable approach. If it's due tomorrow, do it first. Okay? If it's an assessment task, break it down. The first day, I tell my kids, just read the task, break it down into its smallest components, and make a plan across the day. You might spend 2 weeks doing an assessment task, but you spend half an hour a day building on that assessment task. And taking the opportunity to think about it and focus on it actually allows you to do a better assessment task because it's not rushed in the night before. Okay, so an adaptable approach to study, revise every subject every day. What did you cover in class? Revise that night. Keep it as close to possible, and weekly notes. Use Saturday and then have Sunday off. I know Amy was saying I have the weekend off. I tell my kids, work Saturday, work your butt off on Saturday, but then know that you've got nothing to do on Sunday. If you choose to study, that's your choice. And some students do, but at least have that recharge on a Sunday. But make it adaptable.
Just to add to that, I really do think study plans should be dependent on subject type, because different subjects do require slightly different study regimes, right? So for example, if in the instance that anyone's doing 4-unit maths, what it means is that you have to have mastered the 2-unit course. It means you have to have mastered the 3-unit course. It means you have mastered the 4-unit course as well. And with maths, it's not one of those things that there's no way you can study it 2 weeks, 3 weeks before. It's literally just one of those things that you have to chip away at every single day. Now, I know the difference might be different with different people, but for me with English, it's not that I'd study last minute. I never recommend last minute for anything. But largely speaking, when you're writing an essay, it's not 15 minutes a day, right? That's not the way you write 1,000 words. Usually, it's like, I'm gonna sort of take out this 2-hour chunk, and I'm gonna write 300 words. And so that's different to the way you do maths, which might be, half an hour a day or an hour a day. So whatever the subject sort of demands, I'd try to make sure that I'm building a study regime that is suited to that subject.
I'm not going to disagree. I just take that approach that you can chunk out time for English, but if you're a student who really struggles, okay, if your first call is, I don't know how to write an essay, just write the introduction and confirm within yourself, now I know how to write an introduction. In my presentation, I was talking about taking 4 weeks to write one essay. But that's for students who really struggle with it. If a student came into me and said, here's my essay, and it was great off the bat, I wouldn't make them spend 4 weeks writing it. I'd actually go, okay, you know what, you can do an essay a week, and I'll give you a different question every week. But it depends on the student. So if you're really struggling with something like English, take the opportunity to break it down into its individual components and perfect them as you go. English is a subject that you're not motivated towards, then take the opportunity to just start chipping away at it as little as you can.
I'd like to hear from Kate and Amy. I guess you guys are a bit more fresh from that perspective, because they're coming from a teacher's perspective, right? So to come from a student's perspective, I'd really like to nail her question in terms of study plan. What did you guys actually do? Either of you can answer, not both of you, but just to give her that, that hit the nail on the head type of concept.
Well, I actually had a study plan, but that was just mainly for the holidays. So I'd have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'd have the times, but it would be adaptable. So say I plan to do biology for 2 hours. If I'm not feeling like I want to do biology, I won't do it. Because even if I push myself, I'm not going to produce the quality of work I want. So instead, I would be like, okay, I'm going to do 2 hours of 4-unit, take a break. And then what am I feeling like doing now? I'm feeling like I'm going to do some English. To have a study plan, but make it adaptable, because you don't know what you're going to feel like at any time of the day. If you're feeling creative, you would do some English, because that's where your best work will come out of. Because for me, creative writing was something I struggled with a lot. And then once I realized that the basis of a good creative writing was to come from personal experiences, then it's whenever something happened to me, that's when I would do English. I think that was my study plan. It's just dependent on how I felt.
Okay, and we'll go with the last question for the night.
Okay, this is to Scott. What do you suggest we do if you actually run out of time while writing an essay?
Don't run out of time. Sorry, I mean, look, the idea is that if you're running out of time, you're talking about in exam conditions in trials, it comes down to the preparation that you put into it. if you were studying 2 weeks before and then suddenly you realize that you were running over time, that's because the preparation wasn't worthy of the subject. It wasn't worthy of the assessment task that was required. If you practice consistently, you become confident in essay writing, you become confident in creative writing, and you start preparing to get it to that 1,000-word limit or that 900-word limit. Know your limits and practice that consistently. You'll find that you won't run out of time. Okay, so it's your question's actually looking at, if I'm in an assessment task and I run out of time, what will I do? And the only advice is to practice beforehand so that you don't.
And you know, if you actually take that out of your head, don't ever think you're going to run out of time, and practice enough, you actually won't. Think about it the other way around, because you're thinking about it backwards. So make sure you don't run out of time. It will be that's a pretty bad situation to be in, where you want to write an essay, you've got to finish it within a certain time, and you actually don't get. That's when you'd probably kill off a character. You'd probably kill off a character right at the end, right? But you don't want to do that, right? So you definitely want to have that preparation and consistency, and that's the more you practice, I guess, and the more you make sure you do it under time conditions and things like that. I think you actually do a lot better. Can we get a shout out? Who actually enjoyed the night? Who actually thought it was actually pretty good? All right, very good. That sounds really good. Can I get a round of applause for all our speakers for tonight?